You could hear it before you saw it, the hum of a bike chain, the slam of a front door, the distant jingle of the ice cream van rounding the corner. The smell of chip shop vinegar floated on the evening air, and the concrete under your trainers was still warm from the day. If any of that sends a shiver of memory through your spine, you're already halfway there. This isn't just a list, it's a trip back home, back to the blocks, the alleys, the corner shops, the park that raised you. And if you stick around till the end, you might just remember something you haven't thought of in years, something that still lives quietly in your bones. It was never just about the sweets, it was the journey, the way you'd leg it down the stairwell or cut through the alleyway behind the garages, a fistful of coins clenched tight in your hand, the local corner shop, cramped, dimly lit, a little bit dusty, but to you, it was paradise. A whole wall of penny sweets behind the counter, fruit salads, blackjacks, flying saucers. 10 pence in your pocket could last 10 full minutes of choosing. You'd point, hesitate, swap a foam banana for a fizzy cola bottle, and always leave with a paper bag rustling in your coat pocket. And if you had a bit more, maybe a Panda Pop, maybe a Space Raider packet, pickled onion obviously. You didn't just shop, you strategized. You remembered which shops gave you the most for your money. You knew who'd let you mix the flavors and who'd sneak you a few extras if you said, please, in just the right tone. The corner shop wasn't just a building, it was the estate's heartbeat. You bumped into your mates there, stood outside tearing open crisp packets, compared loot before heading back out. And when you passed it late at night, shut her down. The memory of those sugar-fueled afternoons clung to the concrete. Some of those shops are still there, many are gone, but the feeling, that thrill of independence, of choice, of being trusted with a few coins and the power to buy happiness in gummy form, that never leaves you. It started with the sound, that soft, tinny tune drifting in from somewhere just out of sight. You could be halfway through tea, mid-episode of Blue Peter, or round the back on your mate's trampoline, and everything stopped because the ice cream van was coming. And that meant war. You tore through the house or the block, yelling for coins, any coins, raiding the side of the sofa or begging mum at lightning speed. Hurry up or I'll miss it. The van would crawl down the road like it knew it was in charge. Kids swarmed from every corner, queuing with crumpled pound coins in sweaty palms, planning what to get. A 99 flake with raspberry sauce, a screwball with the hidden gum, maybe a slush puppy if it was roasting. And if you were skint, you prayed someone would spot you and say, I'll lend you, but you owe me. The van itself was a wonder, all pastel colors, sliding glass, handwritten signs for things like candy cigarettes and double dips. The freezer fogged with cold, the man inside always somehow knowing whose turn it was next, even in the chaos. And when you finally got yours, that first lick, already melting, dripping down your wrist, it was more than just sugar. It was summer. It was freedom. It was every good thing about being a kid on the estate wrapped into one sticky, magical moment. These days, that sound is rarer. But when you hear it, faint, distant, unexpected, you still feel the flutter in your chest. You still think, where's my quid? They weren't new. They didn't need to be. A Lonsdale top that used to belong to your cousin. Joggers, 2 sizes too big, cinched tight with a frayed drawstring. Hand-me-down tracksuits were a rite of passage. You didn't just wear them. You grew into them, out of them, and sometimes back into them again. They came with history. You could spot the slight fade from years in the wash, the initials stitched into the label by an auntie who tried to keep things organized. Sometimes the zip stuck. Sometimes the knees had patches. But none of it mattered, because on the estate, clothes weren't about trends. They were about toughness, practicality, identity. You wore what was passed down, what was affordable, what worked, and when you put it on, you felt like part of something. There was pride in wearing your brother's old Umbro top, in being handed your sister's Adidas jacket that somehow still smelled like Impulse body spray. Tracksuits were school uniform on the weekends. For playing footy, hanging by the swings, riding your bike down the hill so fast your hood flew back. You might not have had the latest pair of trainers, But if your joggers had stripes down the side and pockets deep enough for a Walkman and some sweets, you were good to go. Today, retro sportswear is back in fashion, but back then, it wasn't retro. It was real, worn thin by years of living, and every scuff, every stain, every stretched cuff told a story you didn't just wear, you lived in. You didn't need a pitch. You didn't even need goalposts. 2 jumpers, 1 ball, that was enough. Estate football matches broke out wherever there was space, the bit between the tower blocks, the patchy grass by the swings, the car park when the grown-ups weren't looking. Teams were made on the spot. Sides were rarely even. Someone always claimed to be goalie and striker, but none of that mattered. The ball was scuffed, probably flat, maybe held together with tape. The rules changed every few minutes, usually to benefit whoever had possession, and arguments were settled with, "One more go, then we swap." You played until the light faded, or a window opened with a mum shouting, "Get in, now!" Shoes were muddied, shins were bruised, and someone always cried, either from a kick to the ankle or from being subbed out. But there was magic in it, that feeling of scoring between 2 wheelie bins, of yelling, "Cross it," and actually pulling it off, of running until your lungs burned just to chase the ball your mate booted into someone's front garden. Sometimes you'd play against a rival crew from the next estate over. The tension, the pride, the bragging rights. No refs, no whistles, just passion, noise, and the echo of your own voice bouncing off the brick walls. And when it rained, even better, sliding tackles turned into mud baths. You went home soaked, covered in grass stains, buzzing, because you didn't just play football, you lived it. And for those few hours, the estate wasn't concrete and corners. It was Wembley. You could smell it before you saw it. That sharp tang of vinegar and hot oil drifting down the block. Friday meant one thing, chippy tea. No fancy plates, no cutlery unless you really needed it. Just a warm, greasy bag in your lap and the promise of the weekend ahead. It wasn't just food, it was ritual. The queue at the chippy was its own event. Local kids jostling, old blokes chatting, someone arguing over who got served first. The menu was simple but sacred. Fish and chips, sausage in batter, curry sauce, mushy peas, and if you were lucky, you got scraps. Those crispy golden shards scooped from the bottom of the fryer, sprinkled on top like treasure. Back home, it all went on a plate, or sometimes straight out of the paper, still steaming. You might eat it on the sofa, telly blaring, or sat on the stairs, legs swinging. The chips were thick, slightly soggy, absolutely perfect. Salt stuck to your fingers, vinegar soaked through the paper, and the batter, crispy, flaky, a little chewy, tasted like nothing else in the world. Some families had it every week, others just when payday hit, but whenever it happened, it felt like a treat, like a break from the routine, like something special at the end of a long, grey week. These days, posh chip shops try to recreate the vibe, but they miss it, because it wasn't about the fish. It was about what it stood for, a full belly, a warm house, a small celebration of simple things, and that feeling, that quiet joy, you never forget. Every estate had one, tall, rusting slightly, baking hot in the summer, and cold enough to sting your legs in winter. The metal slide, wobbly at the top, steep enough to feel like Everest when you were 6. You'd climb it with trainers slipping on the worn metal steps, gripping the handles that rattled when you moved. At the top, you'd pause, partly for the thrill, partly because your mate dared you, then push off, and for a few glorious seconds, you flew, screaming, laughing, maybe catching air near the bottom if you were lucky, or reckless. Sometimes you landed neatly, sometimes you skidded across bark chips, and sometimes you hit the dirt with a thud and a mouthful of grass, popping up with a grin and a scraped elbow. The slide wasn't smooth. It had dents, sticky patches from spilled juice, maybe a dodgy bolt near the top, but it was ours, part of the patchwork playground, alongside the roundabout that spun too fast and the swings with squeaky chains. And on warm evenings, it became a stage, a lookout, a place to sit and plan daft schemes with your mates while the sun dipped behind the block. You'd see who could go down fastest, who dared go backwards, who could climb up the wrong way before the council worker told you off. Today's playgrounds are safer, padded, plastic, but they don't carry the same weight, literally or emotionally, because that old slide wasn't just a piece of kit, it was a badge of courage, a place where you tested your nerve, found your fun, and built your memories one daring descent at a time. They were wild, swirls of red, green, brown, sometimes with gold flecks or odd shapes that looked like ancient runes or spilled tea. Every council flat had one, a carpet that didn't match the furniture but matched 1,000 memories. You'd lie on it after school, chin in your hands, telly blaring in front of you. Your crisps might spill, your drink might stain, but it never showed. These carpets were built to survive. Games were played on them. Marbles, pogs, action figures. You'd trace the loops with your finger, getting lost in the maze of color. Sometimes you'd stare at it during rows or from your sleeping bag when mates stayed over. It was part of the room, but also part of your mind's wallpaper, a backdrop to growing up. You didn't question the patterns. They just were, loud, proud, scratchy under bare feet. If you ever lifted the corner, you'd find years of crumbs and dust bunnies hiding like secrets. And even though they were everywhere, part of the standard issue look of the estate, no two flats ever felt quite the same. Some had rugs on top. Some had patches from years of foot traffic. Some were covered in that strange plastic runner to keep it nice, which only made it slipperier and weirder. But no matter how odd it looked, that carpet grounded you. It made the space yours. And if you ever walked back into an old flat and saw that familiar tangle of color and chaos underfoot, even just for a second, you were home again. There was a sacred window between school and dinner, and that was kids' telly time. You'd drop your bag, kick off your shoes, and flop onto the sofa like you'd just run a marathon. The telly clicked on, sometimes with a thump on the side if it was acting up, and there it was, your lineup. Grange Hill, Blue Peter, Biker Grove, Art Attack, The Demon Headmaster, or Biker Grove, with that one moment that had everyone screaming, "Jeff!" These weren't just shows, they were rituals. You knew the order, the opening songs, the exact moment your favorite bit came on. The volume was never quite right. Someone always shouted from the kitchen to turn it down, but you never did. You ate a wagon wheel or a penguin bar while Neil Buchanan showed you how to make a castle from toilet rolls. You laughed at the same jokes, felt the same thrill when something slightly scary happened, and got genuinely annoyed if the aerial went fuzzy right in the middle of it. Sometimes the telly was shared. You and your siblings all squashed together on a lumpy couch. Other times it was yours alone, a quiet moment before the chaos of dinner, homework and baths. But it always felt like yours, like the world paused for half an hour just so you could escape into bright colors and daft characters. Today's kids have 1,000 channels and endless streaming, but we had that one precious block of time on the same few channels with the same weird charm, and that made it magic. Not just something you watched, something you waited for. They were always too hot, always. The second you sat near one, it started. That creeping warmth that turned into a full-on burn if you weren't careful. But you didn't care. Radiators in council flats were more than just heaters. They were havens. You'd sit with your back pressed against them in winter, legs tucked in, sleeves pulled down over your hands. If it was bath night, you parked your towel on top to warm it. If it was school morning, your uniform trousers went there too, so you didn't freeze putting them on. Some radiators hissed and clanked like they were alive. Some had chipped paint, covered in years of coats drying after rain. The smell of wet socks steaming, that strange heat and fabric scent became part of your winter memory bank. You'd hover by one to warm your hands after running in from the cold. Maybe you burned your thigh through your joggers. Maybe you didn't move even when it stung, because that burn meant comfort, safety, home. You sat by it with a book, your Walkman, maybe your Game Boy, knees curled and forehead sweaty from being too close, but refusing to budge. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't pretty, but in those quiet moments, just you and that steady, humming heat, it felt like the whole world had stopped. Radiators now are sleek and silent, but back then they were characters in the house. Loyal companions through grey skies and long nights, and you'd take a scorched leg over cold toes any day. It was the ultimate rush. You didn't need money, gadgets, or even much of a plan. Just fast legs, a good hiding spot, and a door to knock on. Knock Down Ginger wasn't just a game, it was a tradition. You'd pick a house, usually one with a grumpy neighbor or a mysterious porch, and dare each other to run up, bang the door, and leg it before getting caught. There was strategy to it. One lookout, one runner, maybe a decoy if you were feeling bold. And when you knocked, loud, fast, and once only, your heart jumped into your throat. You'd sprint round the corner, giggling so hard you could barely breathe, hiding behind a bush or crouched behind bins, hoping no one gave you away. Sometimes you got chased. Sometimes you heard the classic, "I know your mum," shouted after you, and once in a while, someone opened the door and just stood there, confused, as you ducked behind a parked car trying not to wheeze. It wasn't cruel, at least not usually. It was mischief, a burst of thrill in the middle of a slow evening, a way to test your courage and bond with your mates through shared laughter and shared blame. Everyone knew the risks, everyone had a story, and even the people you annoyed probably played it themselves once. These days, doorbells have cameras and kids stay indoors, but back then, Knock Down Ginger made the estate come alive after dark. It was pure adrenaline, pure childhood, and the kind of harmless chaos that made growing up there unforgettable. It was always warm in there, not cozy warm, but that muggy, heavy warmth that clung to your skin and smelled like fabric softener, mold, and Monday mornings. You'd hear the low mechanical hum of washers shaking against the concrete, a random sock on the floor like it had been abandoned mid-argument, and in the middle of it all, a couple of mums folding towels, leaning on trolleys, sharing stories in low voices. If you hung about long enough, you'd learn everything. Who was skiving school, whose boyfriend had been seen with someone else, whose kid got caught nicking sweets from the corner shop. It wasn't just a laundry room, it was the estate's newsroom, a place where women ran the headlines while jeans dried on squeaky metal racks. There was always a plastic chair tucked in the corner, cracked and yellowed from age, and you knew if someone was sitting in it, they weren't just waiting on a rinse cycle, they were settling in for a full debrief. You didn't need social media. You had Mrs. Clark's sharp tongue and Mrs. Jones's endless memory, and you knew better than to speak too loud, because what you said in that tiled room had a way of echoing back to your mum before you even got home. Some of us only went in there to help carry back the basket. Others stayed longer, listening with one ear while pretending to rearrange pegs. But whatever your reason, you walked out with more than just clean clothes. You left with stories, little estate legends, carried on the heat of the tumble dryer. These days, most blocks don't have communal laundry rooms, and if they do, they're locked up or empty, quiet. The gossip's gone, the chairs are gone, and somehow the whole building feels quieter without it. You didn't need the lift, but you took it anyway. Every estate kid did. Whether you lived on floor 2 or floor 8, pressing that stiff, flickering button was a ritual. You'd wait, sometimes ages, hearing the metal grumble somewhere above you. Then, ding, the doors shuddered open like they were just a bit reluctant to work that day. Inside, a scratched-up box, smelling faintly of fags, fish and chips, and whatever cheap perfume someone's mum wore on her way to the market. You'd step inside like you were entering a spaceship, slap the buttons, all of them, ride it up and down for no reason other than the thrill of being somewhere with no rules. It was a place of secrets, conversations that couldn't happen at home, dares whispered behind hooded jackets, a stolen second of peace when the flat felt too loud. Sometimes the lift would get stuck, or worse, someone's pram would be jammed sideways in there and you'd have to help nudge it out while their kids stared at you with chocolate on their face. But still, The lift was yours, even when it was grimy, even when it creaked. It was the estate's version of freedom, a metal box where anything could happen, and often did, and when it did break down, everyone noticed. The whole building felt different. Kids playing out would say, "Have you seen the lifts busted again?" like they were reading breaking news. Now, many lifts have been replaced, upgraded, stripped of the grime and the grit and the stories. They're clean, quiet, efficient, but not ours. Not like they used to be, because for estate kids, that lift wasn't just transportation. It was transition. A moment to think, dream, joke, scheme, a little space that felt like a world of its own. These weren't just moments, they were hours, shared across estates, across cities, across time. You didn't need to explain what a chippy tea meant or why the metal slide was both terrifying and brilliant, because someone else lived it too, just down the road or on the other side of the country. The magic of those childhood years wasn't just what we did, it was the feeling of doing it together, in the same blocks, the same parks, under the same grey skies. And now, all these years later, we still carry those pieces with us, like little treasures tucked away in our memory. But the best part? Hearing your stories, because every estate kid has their version, their carpet, their corner shop run, their mate who always got caught playing knockdown ginger. So don't keep it to yourself. If one of these memories brought a smile to your face, tell us. Drop your favorite moment in the comments. What did we miss? What would only your estate understand? Let's fill this space with laughter, stories, and everything that made our childhoods unforgettable. And if this felt like coming home for a few minutes, subscribe, not for the algorithm, for the memories, for the community, for the stories we're still writing together.